So first of all, thank you so much to the community of Sravasti Abbey. I've had a marvelous weekend visiting for the first time, and have been so deeply impressed with the quality of the facility and the community and the kindness that's been shown to me personally. So I really appreciate that, and am so encouraged by this development in the West. And so, deep gratitude to Venerable Thupten Chodron for her vision and positive energy to bring this place into being, and for all of you to support that. So thank you so much. So what I'm going to talk about today, I've been invited to the Christ Lutheran Church in Libby, Montana, to give to participate in an interfaith panel on the subject of life after life. And so part of that is to give a short presentation on the particular views of your tradition, our tradition, concerning the subject of what exactly happens after death, how we live our lives in the face of the reality of death as spiritual people, and this kind of thing. So I was asked to keep it to 5 minutes, and I invariably go long. So I'll try to edit as I go, and we'll see how it turns out. So one of the facts that so troubled the young Prince Siddhartha about 2,600 years ago, and led him to renounce and leave his father's kingdom in the north of India, was the very fact of death. When he learned that there was no way to stave off the loss of that which we cherish most, our own lives, he felt that nothing he could do with the rest of his life would be meaningful at all beyond seeking a state of being beyond death. He left the kingdom asking that question: is there a state that exists that is attainable, that is beyond suffering and death? And that death is inevitable and unpredictable has been a primary spiritual motivator for followers of the Buddha's teachings ever since. As it happens, through the ardent applications of ethical conduct, deep contemplation and meditation, Siddhartha did discover that state beyond death, or any other suffering, and became known as the Buddha, the fully awakened one. To what did he awaken? To the fact that awakening to such an enlightened state was the potential for all conscious beings, not just after death, but right now. The wisdom, free from clinging to ego or any other concept, to which the Buddha awoke, is deathless because it's unborn. It is the ultimate nature of all phenomena. But the Buddha simultaneously understood that the rest of us don't think like that. Instead of abiding in deathless wisdom, we struggle to act in ways that generally try to satisfy an idea that we concocted a long time ago that is so strong it's become an unquestioned assumption, the reality of I, and therefore me and mine. Contrasted, of course, to the less important you and yours. We act from this basis in ways that can be characterized as positive, negative, or neutral, what Buddhists call karma. Such actions leave complex impressions on the mind and form the causes for future lifetimes and many of the happy or difficult experiences within those lives. But the main thing we have is a craving for ongoing ego-based existence. This causes birth, says the Buddha, which in turn results in death, and so on, in endless cycles until a method to achieve liberation from that cycle is applied. One very basic observation underlies the Buddhist idea of rebirth, and that is that the material body is not the mind, nor is it the primary cause of our immaterial consciousness. Cause and effect are always directly related. To put it simply, no one ever got a banana by planting apple seeds. In the same way, the seed of a moment of consciousness is a prior moment of consciousness. If this is so, and everyone has to work that out for themselves and not just take it on faith as the Buddha said it, then the cessation of the body's functions does not discontinue consciousness, or what we call the mind stream. Further, the first moment of consciousness must have come from a prior moment of consciousness, and so on, before the inception of this life. In any case, according to the Buddha, rebirth occurs according to the according to the motivating emotions that make us act, either in relatively positive or negative directions. Those who habitually act out of hatred and aggression may create hellish rebirths that, frankly, and I understand we have a lot of former or recovering Irish Catholics in the room, that make the Catholic description sound like Disneyland. On the other side, there are what we call godlike rebirths of long life and deep pleasure for a while. Buddhists live a life aimed at avoiding either extreme, since even in godlike existences, suffering is inevitable due to the impermanence of what makes up such lives. Again, because our understanding is that everything arises due to very precise cause and effect relationships, we follow the path developing ethics, compassion, and wisdom, seen by the Buddha as to infallibly produce a state beyond birth and death. Interestingly, on our higher path, because of developing impartial universal compassion, our goal is to deliberately return to any embodied form to continue to work the work of bringing about the welfare and liberation of all others. Finally, I'd like to mention that in certain Buddhist traditions, there is some idea of a kind of heaven different from these godlike rebirths. We call them pure lands of the Buddha, such as Amitabha. These arise from the Buddha's enlightened aspirations to free beings from suffering and our own wish to perfect ourselves for others' welfare and benefit. When these conditions come together, it's possible to be reborn in such a pure land where every aspect is conducive to spiritual development without any of the challenges we find in a world such as this. The difference being, of course, that this is not conceived of as an eternal reward, but more like boot camp or some sort of training situation where we take whatever it is that we've developed and accomplished back into the world. Our concern is always for others, never for ourselves. And why? Because the very notion to a bodhisattva of ourselves is preposterous. Once we examine the constituents that make up what we call I, we see that no such thing exists. But to leave it there is simply to rest in a kind of a nihilistic point of view. The deeper, the more important understanding is to understand that that eliminates the conceptual barriers between us. That these are just conceptual barriers. The I and you and the me and yours are simply concepts that when examined don't hold up. And the beautiful thing about that is then we are so deeply connected, both in the relative way of wanting happiness and wanting to avoid sufferings, which we all deserve equally, but in the more profound way of all being indivisible, literally inseparable in our nature. And so if I look at you, 10 of you, and there's one of me, then your importance is obviously more important than mine if we're of equal weight. So it simply makes logical sense, it's reasonable to work for your welfare as opposed to my own. And so this is the Bodhisattva's promise and profound way of life, and thank you very much for living it. I really appreciate that. Thank you very much.